DND number 9, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Chapter 10. It's April 8th, Monday morning, Stewart Ranch, Pine Forest, Georgia. Morning, Uncle Chaz. Morning, Jake. I can take care of the horses if you like, Jake offered. Chaz looked the boy over. Well, not a boy, a man, he reminded himself. You can help. They worked together silently for some time. It was Jake who broke the silence. Do you know the status of the case? The status? Well, I mean, will Brett get out on bail? More than likely, Chaz said, as he hefted a bale of hay into a stall. Do you know when? It could be as early as today. Jake nodded silently. Chaz looked him over. Does your father know what you're thinking? Jake looked confused. Geez, was he so easy to read? Well, heck, if you know, then I'm guessing my father knows. Chaz nodded. I know because I'm Lena's father, and I love her, and I know what I feel like doing. Jake nodded. I spoke to Grandmaster Kino, and he told me that doing something illegal and getting myself thrown into jail would only hurt Lena more than she's already been hurt. And how do you feel about that? Jake ran a hand over his hair. I feel useless. Chaz nodded. I get it, Jake. I do. But Grandmaster Kino was right. As much as I'd like to tear this guy apart with my bare hands, I don't want to hurt my daughter again, or my wife, or my family, by giving in to my baser urges. I have to be strong enough to do the right thing. Jake looked down, realizing Chaz was right. You're right, Uncle Chaz, and I swear, not giving in to those urges is harder, much harder. So I'll be strong and not kill him. But I have to do something, even if it's just to have a few words with him. Remember, Ty made me stand down earlier when I wanted to have a word with Brett. He said he would go and issue a formal warning to Brett and Brett's father, and you see how much good that did. Honor dictates that I at least address the issue with him. Chaz didn't argue with him. Jake continued. I mean, he not only used his fists on her, he not only raped her, but he took her virginity. Chaz's eyes narrowed. And now what? You don't want her? Are you kidding me? What kind of man do you think I am? I'm just trying to figure out where you're coming from. I'm coming from seeing things from her point of view. She's never had sex. Her first time is a horrific experience. Well, that wasn't sex, Chaz interrupted. I get that, but the act is the same. It's going to be difficult to undo the negative experience she's had and help her to know about real love. I mean, about the act of making real love. Jake's face colored as he thought he may have said too much. And Chaz sighed, closed his eyes for a second. I'm guessing from here forward that part is up to you? Jake swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I mean, if she says yes when I ask her to marry me, that is, if you'll approve of me doing that. Chaz nodded slowly. How did we get from having a talk with Brett to asking for my daughter's hand in marriage? I'm not sure, sir. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to say those words, but since I've said them, they feel pretty right, Jake smiled. You haven't even been home 2 weeks, son. Slow down. Think about things. Talk to your parents. Give Lena some time to heal. Then, when you're ready, you have my blessing. But you still have to talk to Lisa. Jake nodded. Yes, sir. So, back to what I originally wanted to say, just a heads up. I have to report to base next week, but before then, I intend to have a conversation with Brett Adderman. Do you want me to come with you? No, sir, I got this. Well, watch your six. Roger that. New scene. It's April 8th. It's Monday morning, Pine Forest High School, Pine Forest, Georgia. Gabe grabbed the books he needed for his next class and shut his locker. So far, it had been a very strange day. You would think that the entire school had suddenly become martial arts fans and had all watched him on TV. Before today, no one at school even knew he was a black belt except for the few who took Master Apple's classes. Even the principal congratulated him on his win during the morning announcements. Kids who'd never spoken to him before were stopping to talk, patting him on the back, and girls were literally throwing themselves at him. His ex-girlfriend from back when he was a sophomore was suddenly making eyes at him again. He looked up to see Peyton coming toward him, grinning. "Hard day?" Peyton asked. "It's like the whole freaking world has gone crazy." "I know, right? It's so cool. I'm proud of you, man." "So you've said about a dozen times. I can't wait for this last class to be over and we can go to baseball practice and just do our thing, you know?" "I guess," Peyton answered. "What do you mean by I guess?" "Have you not seen what's going on? Have you checked your Instagram?" "No, I haven't had time." Peyton pulled out his phone, punched a few buttons, turned the phone around, and Gabe looked at the phone and his stomach dropped. He couldn't fathom what he was looking at. Peyton used his thumb to scroll down, showing not a few, not dozens, but hundreds, maybe thousands of videos and pictures, all of him. Gabe felt sick. "And look at this," Peyton continued. "Did you know that ESPN did research on you before the match Saturday and ran this piece?" Gabe looked. It was an article about Gabe being the son of the former FBI special agent Keegan Tanner, who was famous back 18 years earlier when he broke up a giant child trafficking ring and was subsequently called in front of a congressional hearing for alleged excessive force. His breath hitched. His father was not going to be happy about that. "And that's not all," Peyton said. He went to YouTube. He clicked on trending shorts of Yum. He thumbed through. There were hundreds of videos of him. Gabe looked at a few. One was of him taking that punch to the face. Another of his sidekick that put Julian on his back and was Gabe's first score. Another was him taking the groin shot over and over and over. Another of him on his knees right after the groin shot with the words, "balls of steel," flashing across the screen. Gabe cursed, which he didn't often do. He scrolled some more. He saw close-up pics of just his body parts, one of his chest, one of his abs, one of his mouth, one of his eyes, with some comments about his gorgeous blue eyes. And then some pics of his midsection, with comments that made him blush. Gabe shook his head. He pushed the phone away from his face. "What the hell? I was right. The whole world has gone crazy." He started to class. "We're going to be late." Peyton watched him go. To him, it was just cool and entertaining, but he knew his friend was kind of a quiet guy, serious. Peyton might have to help him navigate all his stuff. Peyton might have to help him navigate all this stuff. He shrugged. It couldn't hurt him either to be the best friend of the most popular guy in school. Later, as they undressed in the locker room, Gabe was looking forward to practice, to some normalcy in his crazy day, but even in the locker room, he couldn't escape it. "Hey, Gabe," Lucas, the first baseman, called. "Why don't you show us those balls of steel?" Everyone laughed, and so did Gabe. What else was he supposed to do? The whole thing was ridiculous. "I wouldn't piss him off if I were you," came from Liam, the catcher. There was a murmur of agreement from the room at large. "I ain't scared of Gabe," Elias said. "Oh," the group called. Center fielder Peyton decided to step in and rescue his friend before things got a little crazy. "Well, I am. He's beat the heck out of me several times." "Well, that ain't saying much," Lucas returned. There was laughter all around and the tension dissipated. After that, thank goodness, the rest of the practice went down as normal. At home that night, dinner was strained, and Gabe's sisters were over at the Stewarts visiting with and cheering up Lena. Gabe's mom and dad were abnormally quiet. Iris was making a mess, smacking her spoon in her mashed potatoes. "How was school?" Keegan asked. Gabe swallowed. "Not great." "You want to talk about it?" Gabe glanced at his mom. He certainly did not want to talk about his balls of steel in front of his mother. He shook his head. "No, sir. Not right now." Keegan nodded. "In my office after dinner, then." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." April 8th, early Monday evening. Joe's Bar and Grill, Pine Forest, Georgia. Jake sipped on his beer at the bar at Joe's. He grabbed a second slice of the pepperoni pizza and stuffed it in his mouth. Next to him, his friend Kurt was making short work of some triple hot wings. I don't know how you do that, Jake commented. It's because he's not human, Landon, sitting on the other side of Jake, put in. They're good, try one, Kurt argued, pushing the plate toward him. Jake shook his head. Nope, I have this firm belief that your food shouldn't hurt you. What a wuss, Kurt mumbled. Bartender Josh Turner, who was an old high school friend of Lena's dad, set the called-for shot glasses in front of them and filled each one to the brim with some straight Jack Daniels. What's the occasion, boys? Josh asked. We're fixin' to go kill a man, Landon said. Josh smiled. Really? Who's the lucky guy? I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you, all four men finished together. Well then, maybe you guys should keep a clear head, Josh suggested. I'm good, Jake said, and I'm the one that counts. Josh's eyes questioned. You guys are just kidding around, right? Of course, Jake said quickly. The three young men finished their food and pushed back. It's about dark, Jake. You ready to do this? Jake nodded and tipped his beer up for one last swallow. He paid the bill and stood up. Who's driving? Kurt eyed Landon. I think I'd better. Landon had a head start before we got here. They headed out and climbed into Kurt's hydro blue Ram pickup. I'm guessing you know the way, Kurt asked. Jake nodded. Oh, I've only driven by there a few dozen times in the past 24 hours. Wow, stalking the guy. That's a bad sign. Well, I was exaggerating. They zoomed south on SR 19. 30 minutes later, they rolled slowly down Hillendale Drive, a high-end, supposedly exclusive neighborhood. Jake had just spent a few days in a truly exclusive neighborhood in Cali, so he wasn't that impressed. They didn't pull into the drive, but parked out on the street a little ways down. The houses in the neighborhood were spaced a good distance apart, so they weren't parked in front of anyone else's property who might get suspicious. It didn't really matter. Jake was only going to have a conversation. He had no intention of breaking the law. He'd pretty much promised his uncle, but this guy had shown violence twice within the week that Jake had first come home. That he was even allowed to get out on bail was beyond belief. At the very least, he had an ankle monitor since he was considered a flight risk. Jake took a deep breath to calm his temper and headed toward the door. Kurt and Landon followed at a distance, being his backup, just in case. Jake slapped a piece of duct tape over the camera, rang the doorbell, and waited. When he finally rang it a second time, the doorknob turned. It was Brett who answered the door. As soon as Brett saw who was at the door, he tried to slam it, but Jake put his foot in the door, pushed it wide open, and stepped in. Is your father here? Jake asked. Why do you want my father? Is he here or not? No, why do you want him? Jake shook his head. This boy was really not very bright. I don't want him. I just wanted to know who else was here so that I could include them in this conversation. Well, no one is here, as usual. What do you want? You're not supposed to come within 500 feet of me. Jake smiled. That's not how it works. You can't come within 500 feet of Lena. So I didn't. So what do you want? I just want to have a conversation. So talk. It's not like I'm going to invite you in to sit down. That's fine with me. Answer me this, Brett. What were you thinking? Did you think you could just do what you did and simply get away with it? Brett shrugged. She led me on like she was going to give it up, and then she just walks away. No girl has ever done that to me. Done that to you? To you? He had to draw a deep breath. So, you think that gives you the right to take her by force? I did, didn't I? And it was worth it. Jake moved so fast that Brett didn't have time to blink, much less run. He had Brett against the wall, his forearm against his throat. Brett struggled to breathe and started to cry. I'm sorry, man. Don't kill me, he gasped. It would be so easy, you know, to end your life right now. But I won't, because I want you to live in prison and see what it's like to have someone violate your body. Brett whimpered. Here's a promise. You try to run, you go near her or any member of her family, and your life will come to an abrupt, very painful, and very violent end. Got it? Yes, Brett was barely able to grind out. Jake let him go. Then I'll see myself out. Brett stood against the wall, gasping for air, and watched him leave. Jake walked outside and came up short. There, in the drive, were 2 cars, each with 2 men leaning on the cars, arms calmly folded across their chests. Sitting on the ground next to the cars were Jake's friends. Jake walked slowly toward the scene, his eyes shifting from one man to the next. Finally, he stopped and pointed at them. Ameritech? The men half smiled and slowly nodded. Guess I'm in trouble? One of the men shrugged. Well, you can figure that out when you speak with Mr. Tanner. I'm thinking since there was no blood that you'll probably just get a slap on the wrist. It really just depends on what kind of mood he's in, another guy said. Yeah, that could be a freaking hard slap, another said. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, another said. Great, Jake responded, sighing deeply. Can we get up now? Kurt asked. Oh, yeah, almost forgot about you guys. You may get up and get your butts out of here. They rose quickly. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. How do you know there was no blood? Jake asked. We watched on video, one of the agents replied, holding up his phone. Jake sighed. Am I free to go? They nodded. Mr. Tanner will want to see you tomorrow at 0600 hours at his home. Jake nodded. I'll be there. Hey, I would have done the same thing, an agent said. Thanks. Semper Fi, brother. Jake looked up quickly and realized the agent was a Marine. Ooh-rah. New scene. April 8th, Monday evening. Tanner home, Pine Forest, Georgia. Gabe sat in his father's office. In again, the hot seat. He blew out of breath. He hoped it wasn't going to be a long session because he had homework, and he was also hoping to get a call into Taylor. Keegan smiled at his son. So, I know I've said this a lot lately, but I'm proud of you. Gabe frowned. Keegan nodded, and that told him what he wanted to know. It's not because of the tournament you just fought in, though that was impressive. It's because of the young man I see you turning into. Respectful, responsible, kind, protective of your mother and sisters. The qualities I see in you are way beyond your 17 years. Gabe offered a small smile. So, tell me about your day at school. What happened? Gabe drew a deep breath and told him everything that had taken place in school, from his old girlfriend trying to hook up with him right down to the locker room chatter and the fleeting thought that he may have to face off on a teammate. Well, your mother and I have seen the videos and the pics and the articles, some that you haven't mentioned and I hope you never see. I guess I have to apologize, son. Apologize? Yes. Grandmaster Kino warned us that you fighting in that tournament could bring a lot of publicity, unwanted publicity. I know all too well that the media can change your life for better or worse, and I think mostly for worse. I was thinking only about what an honor it was for the Kinos to recognize your talents and skills, and what an opportunity it was for you to test yourself and to reach deep to achieve something. I didn't really give too much thought to what all the publicity could do. I mean, you hadn't killed anybody, so what could they say? This kid fights really well? I didn't think about the fact that they would want more information about you and start digging and bring up my past. It must be difficult for you to have your friends at school see you and think, there's the guy whose father is a killer. I'm sorry, Gabe, that my past actions, Dad, stop. If kids at school are thinking that, then they're not my friends. The ones who are my real friends have only respect for you. I have only respect for you. I know all about what happened back before I was born. I know what a hero you are. Jeff has told me all about it, and Master Apple, and I've talked about it. I know what you did and why you had to do it, and I feel really bad that there were people who didn't appreciate your service. But, Dad, there were also people who did appreciate it, and I'm one of those people. Keegan didn't often get emotional, but he couldn't stop the moisture that gathered in his eyes, and he nodded. I appreciate the pardon. Still, you are a minor, and I should have thought harder about what the consequences would be before I signed that contract to allow you to fight. So, for that, I am sorry. Things might be difficult for a while, Gabe. People getting all into your business, the public saying things that are personal, and when someone rises to the top like you have, when they do it quickly like you have, there's always jealousy and resentment. And that means people will challenge you, and you will have to walk a thin line trying to decide when to defend yourself and when to let things go. Always, Gabe, always try to go the nonviolent route whenever possible. Gabe nodded. Yes, sir. Keegan smiled. So, even though you're the ultimate male, I'd like to ask you to be very aware of your surroundings at all times. Dad, I can take care of myself. Keegan chuckled. I know you think you can, and I know you've gained quite a bit of confidence since the tournament, but you are no match, let's say, for a couple of full-grown men who have no qualms about hurting you. A tournament is not even close to a street fight. Why would full-grown men want to hurt me? I don't know why. I'm trying to cover my bases here. You have no idea what evil there is in the world. Like our Lena Bug. Who would have thought that someone could do to her what he did? She never thought it, but it happened. And I don't want to make you cynical, but we have to open our eyes that all this publicity could put you in the crosshairs of someone's scope. Gabe nodded. Keegan held up a finger as his phone buzzed and he read the text. He rolled his eyes, typed out a quick text, and hit send. Everything okay? Gabe asked. Yep. Jake's just trying to get himself into trouble. He placed his phone down and smiled. Before I let you go, have you done any more thinking on what college you're going to go to? Gabe shook his head. I can't figure it out. I just can't seem to decide. Well, time is running out. Yes, sir. I'll do some more thinking and praying and see what I can figure out. And I will too. Do you have homework? Yes, sir. I guess I'll let you go to it, unless you have something else to discuss. Well, I do want to ask something, if that's okay. Shoot. He smiled. What's so funny? Nothing. Anyway, so I guess I don't want to ask something. I want to ask for something, and I'm completely willing to work for it. Okay. When school gets out, can I take a little trip? A trip to where? He asked, though he knew the answer. Gabe smiled. To California? I'll see if I can arrange it. Thanks, Dad, Gabe said as he rose. Keegan came around the desk, held out his hand, shook his son's hand, and then brought him in for a hug. Remember, son, be awake and aware. Even balls of steel won't help if you're taken by surprise. Dad, I can't believe you just said that. Keegan chuckled. You know, your mom is not at all comfortable that her little boy is being thought of in that way. So be kind to her. Her little boy is growing up. I will be extra good to her, Gabe promised as he left the room. He stuck his head back in. Hey, you guys coming to my game Friday? Of course, we wouldn't miss it. New scene, April 8th, Monday evening, South Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. Currently, the fitness room of the South Keno Estate was occupied by females. From her place on the treadmill, Bree watched her daughter as she went about placing weights on the barbell. She looked so much like Jeffy, it was uncanny. 3 years ago, when Taylor had been just 13 years of age, she tried to pass herself off as Jeffy in order to save her from some nutcase who was trying to hurt her. Taylor had always been so fearless. She just moved her weights from 35s and 5s to 35s and 10s, and she straddled the bench and sat down. She'd been working out for a good 30 minutes now. She was sweating. Usually she had on her AirPods, but not today. She was frowning, or maybe just concentrating. Whatever it was, she wasn't herself. She usually had the same personality traits as her dad, namely jovial and upbeat. Lately, that hadn't been the case. Do you need me to spot, honey? Bree asked. Taylor glanced up at her mom. No, I got it. How's school going? Taylor shrugged. Okay, I guess. Did you get your grade back on your essay? Sighing, Taylor nodded her head. I got a B+. Why? Well, let's see. I had a few run-on sentences. I used the term super fast twice. I started several sentences with but. I had a few sentence fragments. A few of the paragraphs were too long. I used the term like. You know, he was like super fast. Also, it was too religious, and yet I forgot to say that young Eric was a devout Christian like I did everyone else. And mostly, the biggest thing I did wrong was I didn't choose a career path. They said not going to college and being a wife and mother was an easy way out, or something like that. Well, first, being a wife and mother is not easy. It's difficult, it's honorable, and it's a blessing. If that's your choice, it takes a lot of love, perseverance, physical, mental, and emotional stamina, dedication, and wisdom. I could go on, so don't listen to them about that. I wish the schools would teach English, math, and science and stop putting their opinions over on my daughter. Right? And they said it was too religious. I mean, how can it be too religious if my faith is a large part of my life? Bree frowned. May I see the essay you wrote and the teacher's notes? Taylor shrugged. Sure, I don't care. Well, you should care. Why should I when I put so much thought into it and was completely honest and I tried so hard and I don't get a fair grade? Okay, I hear you, sweetie. Let me read it first and then we'll talk about it. Fine. Taylor laid back and hefted the bar and pushed out 10 and replaced it. She stood, went to the squat machine and pushed out her last 15, walked around a bit, went back to the bench, lay down and didn't move. Bree didn't say anything at first, but after 10 minutes she got off the treadmill, grabbed a stool and went to sit beside her daughter. Sweetheart, there's more wrong than your essay, isn't there? Taylor sat up. As soon as she did, the tears ran over onto her cheeks. Oh, honey, Bree said as she put her arms around her daughter. What is it? Can you tell me? Mom, I never thought I could feel this way. It hurts so bad. I can't stand it, and I can't keep living like this. Bree pulled her away just enough to see her face, and she used her hands to brush the tears away. Baby girl, are we talking about this little thing you've got going with Gabe? Taylor burst into a second round of hard sobs and threw herself against her mother. It's not little, Mom. I miss him so much. It feels like my heart has been torn from my body. I can't do anything. I can't concentrate. I can't do my schoolwork. I feel like I'm going to die. Oh, sweetie, I understand. Truly I do. She held her until the sobs died down to a few sniffles. What am I going to do? It feels like it's the end of the world. I know, sweetie, but you're young. This will pass. No, she practically screamed. I don't want it to pass. I just want to be with him. I mean, I need to be with him, to live with him. Honey, you're only 16 years old, and that's not going to happen. Taylor stood up just as her father came into the room. I knew you wouldn't understand. You don't understand anything. Ugh! Hey, Ricky's voice was not loud, but commanding. I don't know what's going on here, but you will not speak to your mother that way. She stood there, the tears running down her face. She turned to her mother. I'm sorry, Mom. Really. She ran past her dad and up to her room. Ricky looked down at his wife, who also had tears running down her face. Bree, honey, what the heck is going on? What don't you understand? Well, she's heartsick over Gabe. I mean, really and truly hurting. She says she feels like her heart has been ripped out. Well, that is descriptive. He frowned. It sounds to me like you understand. Well, she pretty much says she wants to go live with him, and I told her that's not going to happen. And you were absolutely correct. Bree threw her hands up. I have no idea what to do. Ricky pulled her up and into his arms. We'll figure it out. She laid her head on his chest. I wonder if I was this much trouble for my mom. Oh, I'm pretty sure you were. She looked up at him, surprised, and then laughed. You always seem to make things better. Well, I don't know about that, but we can start right here. Let's have a prayer and go talk to our daughter. New scene. It's still April 8th, Monday evening, Stewart home, Pine Forest, Georgia. Hey, ladies, Jake said as he came in the kitchen door of the Stewart home. Lena and the Tanner twins were all sitting around the kitchen table with bowls of ice cream, bananas. That would be, Lena and the Anderson twins were all sitting around the kitchen table with bowls of ice cream, bananas, chocolate sauce, and whipped cream. Hey, Jake, they all said at once. He came and kissed Lena's cheek. Aw, isn't that sweet, Lily said. Yeah, I always wondered if you two were ever going to be smart enough to get together, Rose added. We finally figured it out, Jake said. You guys mind if I grab a bowl and make me a banana split? I promise to stay out of your way, and I'll go see what's happening in the den. Well, in the den, some very cute-looking soldiers are saving the world, Violet informed him. Oh, then I'll fit right in, he joked. The girls all giggled. You're not a soldier, Lena said softly. You're a Marine. Jake smiled at her. That's my girl. Lena watched him as he put his banana split together. The moment he came in, everything changed. The air shifted. There was such power and strength in every movement he made. He had a commanding presence. He was squirting the chocolate sauce heavily over his ice cream, so much that you could no longer see the ice cream. He then picked up the whipped cream and eyed Lena. She blushed. He filled his bowl with it. He looked up to see them all watching him. I'll just make myself scarce. They watched him leave. Some of them actually sighed. When did he get to be so cute? Lily asked. He's always been cute, Lena said. Maybe so, Rose said, but he hasn't always been sexy. Well, Daisy finally spoke. He certainly is now. You're so lucky, Lena, Lily purred. When everyone got quiet, she realized her mistake, but decided to double down. Well, she is lucky where Jake is concerned. The bruises are going to fade. As a matter of fact, they already have, and she's going to have Jake for always. That is very romantic, Rose said, but let's talk serious now. How are you feeling, Bugs? I'm doing better. Emotionally, I go back and forth. It must have been scary when it was happening, Violet said softly. It was. I thought he was going to kill me. I mean, once he'd gone over the edge, he had to know that I was going to go straight to my dad and he would be arrested. So he could have killed me and thrown my body in the lake and gotten away. But he didn't. She shrugged. Sounds like some divine intervention to me, Daisy said. Praise Jesus, Rose said. Absolutely. Lena nodded. It did seem like God intervened. She remembered Mr. Tanner saying something about, we're not guaranteed to live a life with no problems, but God will be with us throughout those problems. So maybe he was there with me, she thought. But why would he allow me to go through it? The answer came into her mind so quickly. We have to learn to handle all the obstacles that come our way, even hard ones. She would try to do that. She would handle it. In the den, Jake finished his ice cream and then played a few rounds of Call of Duty with Charlie and Matthew. He finally gave up his controller and asked the boys, Where's your dad? I think he's in Mom's office, Matt said. Jake went down the hall and knocked on the office door. Come in, Chaz called. Jake poked his head in. Are you alone? Yes. You want to talk? Yes. Mission accomplished? Yes, sir. You feel better? Much. Did he say anything worth repeating? Jake thought about telling Chaz that he'd said it was worth it, but decided that wouldn't help anyone. No, sir, nothing. Chaz nodded. Good talk. Jake started out and then stopped. Would it be okay if I stay with her again tonight? I just need to ask her some questions. I promise no messing around. You don't have to say that. I believe you have her best interest at heart. And yes, you can stay. I think she needs you to be nearby right now. Roger that. Jake started to leave. Oh, and Jake? Yes, sir? I guess you'd better set your alarm if you're going to be at Tanner's house by 6. Jake's mouth opened and then he smiled. Roger that. New scene. April 9th, wee hours of Tuesday morning. Stewart home, Pine Forest, Georgia. They'd talked almost half the night. It felt really good to lie in the bed next to the girl with whom he'd fallen in love and have permission from her father to be here, Jake thought. Under normal conditions, they'd be in big trouble, but circumstances were no longer normal. His goal was to help Lena to heal in any way he could, and he was pulling out all the stops. He'd spoken to his Aunt Lisa about Shelley Keno, hoping she would invite Mrs. Keno here to speak to Lena. He'd also spoken to Lena, breaching the subject of EFT, and asked her to please consider it, and also to ask her own father about it. And now, during this night of lying beside her, he'd already asked her several of the questions the Grandmaster Keno had spoken to him. Some of the answers made him proud of her, like she said she felt no fear and only irritation when she first saw him drive up, and how she told him to get lost. And when he asked the question about when she realized what was going to happen and it was inevitable, she broke a little bit. She said it was after about the third time he'd hit her in the head and she got dizzy. He'd ripped her shirt, and it dawned on her what was going to happen. The telling of that part had brought on a fresh bout of tears, but that was what Jake was after, the wallowing, as Grandmaster Keno put it. And then he asked her if Brett had said anything to her during or after the act, and the filthy things he said to her made him wish he would have done more than just threaten the guy. But her answering the question, instead of refusing to talk about it, made it evident that she needed to vent. She trembled, she cried, she hit the pillow, and only after she'd gotten it all out did he pull her close and comfort her. All in all, he felt like they were making progress. Now he lay beside her, watching her sleep, his heart filled to overflowing with the love he felt. It was so weird. 2 weeks ago, all he could think about was getting home to see his parents and eating some of Graham's cooking. Expecting to see Lena over the course of his leave was a fleeting thought, but he never expected to be in her bed, holding her against his body, thinking about when and where he would ask her to marry him. Yet, thinking those thoughts now, he couldn't conceive being without her. He was going to have to leave for 5 days next week, report to base in North Carolina for ongoing training. He just realized he needed to tell her so she can be well prepared. She moaned and turned over on her back. He could just barely see her face. She was healing fast. The swelling was down, maybe not all the way. Some of the smaller bruises were already fading. He stealthily pulled down the ribbing of the t-shirt she slept in to expose the bruises she'd shown him on her upper chest. They, too, were fading. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. "Oh, sorry. Just trying to assess the healing process." "Aw, and I thought you were trying to get a peek at me." Jake smiled at the flirtatious words. They meant her mind was also healing. "Sorry I woke you. I was just lying here watching you sleep." "What are you thinking about?" About a few things." "Like what?" "Like wondering if you would feel like going to Gabe's baseball game on Friday." She frowned. "Can I think about it?" "Sure. What is it you want to think about specifically?" She shrugged. "Maybe I just want to see what my face will look like in a few days." "Got it. Just remember, it will be good for you to get out and do something normal." "Speaking of that, I think I'd like to shoot tomorrow, and as soon as I turn 21, I'd like to go into the courthouse and apply to get my CCP." Jake nodded his approval. Maybe if she'd had her weapons permit, she would have had her gun on her hip and Brett would have been deterred. But she needed more training, that is for sure. Not training on how to use a gun. She had that down pat. She needed self-defense training and what to do in certain situations, because she wouldn't want to pull a gun on her attacker and have him reverse the situation. She turned closer to him, laid her head on his chest, her hand splayed over his abdomen. "Anything else you want to discuss?" she said as she yawned. Her hand was moving in circles over him, and he placed his hand on hers to still it. He drew a deep breath. "Yes, I have to leave next Monday. Well, actually, Sunday night." She drew in a sharp breath and rose up. "Why?" He patted her hand softly, trying to keep her calm. "I have to report to base. I'll be gone for 5 days." He felt her body literally shudder. Saying nothing else, she laid her head back down. He started to question her, but decided she'd had enough questions for one night. She needed time to digest the information. He wrapped his arms snugly around her and let her sleep. April 9th, 5:55 a.m. Tuesday morning. Tanner home, Pine Forest, Georgia. Gabe ran down the stairs to answer the door. "Hey, Jake," he said, surprised to see him. "Hey, your dad is expecting me." "This early? Why?" "I'm, in trouble." Gabe laughed. "What'd you do?" "I went to have a word with the guy who raped Lena." "Cool. Did you kill him or something?" Jake chuckled. "No, but I wanted to. I did get a little rough, though. I'm guessing that's why your dad wants to yell at me." "Oh, Dad doesn't yell." "Okay, that's good to know, except that means he does that calm thing, like my dad and the Kinos, which can be very scary." "Yeah, it can. Well, he's in his office. Go ahead in." "Thanks, Gabe. Have a great day." "Yeah, that's probably not going to happen, but thanks." Jake knocked on the door even though it was halfway open. "Agent Tanner?" "Yes, Jake, come in and close the door." That didn't sound great. He did as he was told and then took a seat in the chair opposite the desk. "Jake, I've known you pretty much your entire life." "Yes, sir." "Your father is not only my best friend, but my brother in arms." Jake nodded. "So, he's asked me to make a few points with you that he feels apparently he was unable to get across." Jake swallowed and nodded. "Yes, sir." "From what I understand, being Marine Special Forces has been your goal since you were a little kid." "Yes, sir." "So you go and accomplish exactly what you wanted to accomplish and come home with the distinct honor of being the youngest Marine Raider on record." Jake nodded. "And then, because your testosterone levels are surging, you do something that would put all that in jeopardy." Jake frowned. "No, sir." "No? It wasn't because of testosterone. We're supposed to protect the people we love." "Well, if you want to get technical, the need to protect our women is a male thing and actually does involve our testosterone levels." Jake sighed. "Okay. I meant it wasn't just to prove my manhood or something like that." "I understand. But how smart do you think it was to put everything you've ever worked for at risk? You do know that if you break the law as a Marine, you can put an end to your military career, right?" "I was just going to have a conversation." "But that's not how it went down, is it?" "No, sir. But, sir, what—" He stopped. He sighed. "Go on, Marine." "If he had beaten and raped one of your girls, or your wife, what would you have done?" "You've been saving that one, huh?" Keegan asked with a smile. Jake shrugged and smiled slightly. "It would have been a great battle for me, and I probably would have sought a conversation also. However, I would have been smart about it. Public place, no cameras. You effectively pushed your way into his home and assaulted him. He said getting what he wanted from her was worth it, and I was making him rethink that. I know what he said. I understand you wanting to kill the guy, but you have to think. You have to be smart, and you have to understand that part of being a man is to know when to stand down. Sacrificing yourself or your military career helps no one." Jake sighed and looked down. "Copy that, sir." "You thought about the door camera. You put tape over it, and that was it. Surely you know a home like that would have security cameras outside and inside. If not for Ameritech keeping watch over the perp, you could be prosecuted. Luckily, somehow, all the video from those few minutes has disappeared, nothing but static." Jake looked up, surprise on his face. "You're welcome." Jake nodded. "Thank you, sir. Next time you want to go off half-cocked, talk to your dad or me." "Well, I spoke to Grandmaster Keno and Uncle Chaz." "And did Eric tell you to have the conversation?" "No, sir. He told me to push my need for revenge aside." "Uh-huh. And what did Chaz say?" "He told me it would be best to stand down, but he understood if I needed to go confront the guy. He even offered to come with me." Keegan nodded. "Well, I'm going to give him a pass because it was his daughter, and I'm sure he's been feeling the same way as you. From here on out, Jake, be smart. Don't mess up everything you've worked so hard for. Yes, sir. Now, on another note, Gabe has a game Friday, 1800 hours. Thought you might want to know. I'll be there. Bring Lena if she's up to it. Getting out and around people is important for her healing process. Roger that. You're dismissed. Jake stood, shook hands, and saw his way out. And that is the end of Chapter 10.